The first time I was in Iraq in 2005, it was a very tough period. There'd been a lot of intense fighting the year before and leading up to our particular operational tour. We'd lost some amazing people out there, friends, colleagues, or what I would call heroes, in fact. So it was a tough couple of months, and there was a particular patrol that I was on, and I was in the lead vehicle on this patrol, and we were moving to a village called Majir al-Kabir, which is in the British military. It's quite an infamous village because in 2003, a group of Royal Military police officers tragically lost their lives in Majir al-Kabir. It's one of the main sort of cities in eastern Iraq in the province of Maysan. And we were going to this particular town, and as we were going down this main sort of highway, what we would call a main transit route, like a busy motorway for a better word or a description, there was a group of children playing, what I thought were playing at the side of the road. And as you can imagine, in any part of the world, children and a busy main motorway, they shouldn't be near each other. So straight away as a soldier, you're always looking for what I would call, we would call it a presence of the abnormal, something that doesn't look right or something is out of place, because that would give us an indication that maybe something doesn't add up here, or, we should be alert, or we should have our wits about us. And these particular children, as I'd seen them at the side of the road about, a quarter of a kilometre maybe ahead. And I'd sort of said to the two vehicles, we were in like Land Rovers, and there was three of us in a convoy, if you like. And I said on the radio, just to warn everybody, that there's a group of children at the side of the road. Let's make sure we take a wide berth. So, it could be a trap or an ambush or something. I wasn't sure at the time. But as we got closer and closer, I realized that they weren't playing and they weren't there to do us any harm. So with the team, I made the decision to pull over, and because they looked to be in distress, these children, they were sort of waving us down at the side of the road. And you have to make a quick decision, because that wouldn't have been uncommon for us to be part of an ambush, children slowing us down, and then all of a sudden we're under attack. It felt the right thing to do at the time, to pull over and try to help these kids to see what the problem was. And unfortunately, one of the children, he had this little boy had inadvertently stepped on what we call an IED, an improvised explosive device, or a roadside bomb for tragic circumstances. And the children were asking for help, and my patrol, we got out of the vehicle. We sort of secured the area, and we tried to patch this little boy up. We give him medical care, first aid. We had a medic with us. And unfortunately, tragically, he'd lost a lot of blood. He'd had a catastrophic bleed. He'd hemorrhaged a lot of blood. And unfortunately, and tragically, as I say, he lost his life in that moment while we were there with him, which was horrific, really. It really was. And every time I tell that story, it gives me a lump in my throat. I can feel my emotions still very raw, even like 18 years later. It's such a strange feeling. And through myself now. And we decided to terminate the patrol because we lost about, an hour and a half dealing with this incident. So we didn't go to our meeting in the end. So we turned around and we headed back to camp. And when I was going back to camp, I was racking my brains, like, how has this incident occurred? What were these kids doing in this area? It was a busy road, and I was playing like all the scenarios through my head. And I had my interpreter with me, a local Iraqi gentleman, a lovely man. And I said to him, Mohammed, what were these kids doing playing next to the main road? Why were they not at school? It's so stupid, this. And for me, it was a throwaway comment. I was, 19, 20 years old. And I said, why were they not at school? And Mohammed, he looked at me in such disgust and disdain. And he looked at me with like great disappointment, almost like he was angry. And he said, Jordan, these kids will never go to school. There is no school. And if there was a school, they probably couldn't afford it or even get to it anyway. He said, it's not like the places that you've grew up in. It's not like the West or the UK or America or anything like that. And when he said that, really for the first time in my life, 20 years old, I think I was probably. And it really made me think, wow, I got to go to school. I had it easy and I had all the opportunities in the world, and I never took any of them. And that was the first time I really realized that school was a privilege. Having access to education is one of the greatest privileges that any child will ever get. And I don't mean private education. I don't mean the best education. I just mean basic education. The simplest of things. And I went back to to the camp that night, and I was lying in my sleeping bag, and I can remember I was having a little cry to myself in my pillow, thinking I just want to go home because a couple of weeks before I'd lost a very close friend in my team, Alan Brackenbury, Lance Corporal Alan Brackenbury. Brax tragically lost his life on the 29th of May 2005. We lost three more colleagues on the 16th of July 2005 in our sort of patrol, and it was a really tough period. And I remember saying to myself in that tent that night in that sleeping bag that one day I'm going to come back to one of these places that I've served in or worked in, and I'm going to try to help some of these kids when I'm in a more when I didn't really know what that promise was going to be or where it was going to lead me, but I just knew that it was a promise that I wanted to keep, and one day I wanted to do something about it. And then, yeah, I obviously served for another 5 or 6 years in the army. I didn't sort of pick up on that promise, so to speak, because I was very busy as a soldier. And then in, 6 years ago now, I've been out the army 5 years at the time. This is, yeah, probably 6 years ago. And I was on an expedition on the Horn of Africa, and I was trying to be the first person to row across quite a dangerous stretch of water called the Bab el-Mandab Straits between Yemen and the Horn of Africa. And I was out in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa doing a recce, sort of looking at getting local contacts from the Coast Guard and the Navy, doing the risk assessment and all that sort of stuff. And I got the chance to visit a few of the villages and a few of the refugee camps. And when I was on this recce for my expedition, I met this little boy called Ibrahim. And he told me his story. And, he tragically lost his family in Somalia, and he'd been moved to the Horn of Africa. He'd not seen his real family, his biological family, for about, I can't remember, a year and a half or something. What stood out was when I asked him what he wanted to do when he was older, he said, I just want to go to school. I just want to learn. It was in that very moment when he said that, I knew it was like everything made sense in my life. It was like, I've got to help this kid. This is my chance to make that promise from, 15 years ago in Iraq or whatever it was. This is my chance to do some good in the world now and help this little boy he's lost everything. He wasn't a kid like me, even though my upbringing wasn't the best or anything, or I wasn't privileged. It was full of love and happiness and positive things. And this little boy had nothing. I don't know what came over me, but I made a promise and said, I'm going to help you build a school for you and your friends here on the Horn of Africa. And yeah, it took me the next 5 years of trying to keep that promise to go on all these weird and wacky adventures and crazy expeditions around the world, fundraising, to eventually in 2021 on the 14th of May, I was able to cut the ribbon on the school gates and gift this school for 250 kids with the president's blessing of the country. And it was by far, alongside being a father to my daughter, the greatest thing that I've ever achieved and the most fulfilling thing. And now, I'm heading back out there actually in about 6 weeks from now with a group of 12 volunteers to go and volunteer at the school and do some adventures out on the Horn of Africa. So that's something we try to do every year. We did it last year. We're going to do it this year. We booked up for next year. It's amazing for me how adventure, which is what I've done for the last 12, 13 years, can be used in such a way that it can have such a positive and profound impact on other people's lives. Because people often think that, when you're an adventurer, you just go and get to do all these cool things around the world, whether it's climbing a mountain or jumping out of a plane or paddling, rowing. They think it's just fun and games. But for me, being an adventurer is actually, it's a serious responsibility. If you've got a profile of any sort, if you're privileged enough to have these opportunities to go travel the world, well, then for me, I think you have to do something good with that. I think it's a responsibility to society, to get to go to places like Antarctica. Less than 1% of the world will ever go to Antarctica. Climbing some of the most remote parts of our planet is a great privilege, and I don't take that for granted ever. I know that can be taken away from me at any moment. So for me, it's about using that to help educate young people through that. I love to tell the stories of the people I've met, the nomadic tribes, the different cultures, religions. I love to take photos and bring them back for schools. I love to try and champion good causes for charities using adventure. And for me, the cause and the purpose or the why is so much bigger than the expedition or the adventure. The adventure is the fun bit, but it's the mission and the power is within why you do it, I think. For me, anyway.